Good morning, everyone. My name is Rich Sloma. Welcome to today's New York State Archives presentation of Avoiding the Paper Avalanche, the quest for the paperless office. The session is being recorded and will be available for future viewing. Today's presenter is David Lowry. David is the New York State Archives Manager of Local Government Advisory Services. If you have any questions during this presentation, please type them in the chat feature to the right side of your screen, and we will answer them at the end of the presentation. And at this point, I'm going to change Dave's role to presenter, and he can take it away.
Thank you, Rich, and good morning, everybody. So it looks like right now we have at least, look, 99 people, 100, keeps going up, so over 100 people who want to go on this quest for the paperless office. And it's been a long quest for many. The term paperless office actually goes back, believe it or not, all the way to the 1960s. So many people out there have been dreaming of the paperless office for over 50 years, but unfortunately a lot do not reach it. So we're hoping today to help you get there. So let's take a quick look first at our agenda. So what we're going to do today is explore why the paperless office is still elusive for many. Because if you're going to go on this quest and you're going to reach your goal, the first thing you need to understand is why do these problems still persist with paper. Next, we're going to discuss the advantages of a paperless office, and I think many of you already know this. There are a lot of advantages to it. But also, we really need to look at the flip side and consider all those many challenges of meeting the paperless office. As this webinar will make clear to you, it's doable, but it's not going to be an easy road to go down to reach it. And finally, we're going to provide a step-by-step plan to reach the paperless office. And there really are a lot of little common sense things you can do to help you get there. Or even if you don't reach all the way, I mean, maybe help you get 50% of the way there, 70, 80% of the way there. That would be a great victory in and of itself. But here is a question I'd like folks to ponder for maybe about a minute or so. Okay, so should a paperless office be a records management goal? And there is no right or wrong answer, but if anybody has an opinion on this, you just want to quick write in, yes, I do think it's a records management goal, or no, and see what people are saying. And you should be able to reach all participants. Just want to see if anybody's got an opinion on this either way. Not seeing anything pop up. So,
we have some.
Okay, so Wendy says yes to an extent. Okay.
We have some private input. Crystal says yes, it should be. James, if possible, depends on the legality. Wendy,
okay.
Yes, you saw that.
Yeah.
Nancy, yes. Sue, yes and no. I think it's about reduction and organizational.
Yes, and I think that's that last one is a good answer. I mean, I would lean. I mean, I think the paperless office can be a really good thing, but I would lean more towards no on that question. And the reason is records management should be about managing all your records well, regardless of whether they're in paper. And something we're going to talk about here is the fact that paper might not be the root of your problem. So first, again, you got to get to what the root of your problem is before you can start to really solve that problem, right? So sometimes, the root of your problem is not the fact that your records are in paper. It's just simply that the paper is not managed very well, right? Or maybe it's not managed at all in some circumstances. So you could be suffering from problems like there's little or no program support. So perhaps whoever your chief administrative officer is, say the town supervisor, the school superintendent, that person doesn't put a lot of stock in records management, right? And maybe your board does not give you a lot of support. There's not a lot of budgeting there for records management. You don't have any established policies and procedures, right? So nobody really knows what to do. No records management training, which is closely related to the previous point, right? So if you do have policies and procedures, you want to make sure that people know they exist and they're well trained on them. Here's a biggie: retention schedules are not followed, or they're followed very loosely. Now, one thing my colleagues and I notice when we go around and we visit folks and they say, oh, God, we're just drowning in paper out here. We don't know what to do. So we'll start taking a look at their records and saying, hey, you got a lot of records here past their retention period. If you start going through applying the retention schedule, you might be surprised. You might be able to get rid of 25, 30, even higher percentage of those records, which will go a long way to helping you. Sometimes people really don't have much of filing systems. They just, open up the drawer and they stick things in without much rhyme or reason. Same thing with your inactive record storage area. So maybe you might have a room where people kind of just throw their records, right? They take them, they throw them into that, old photocopy paper box and, write fiscal records on it and plop it in there. And then when they need to go find those records, it's very difficult, right? Because they're not well labeled. And also, if people aren't applying the retention periods, the stuff just builds up and builds up and builds up. So, but like I said, there are many advantages of a paperless office. Just to give a quick overview here. It can help you greatly improve your business processes. So perhaps your purchasing process that may take 24 distinct steps, you can now reduce it down to maybe 9 or 10, right? And you're really upping your efficiency there. Reducing storage costs. Obviously, if you don't have a lot of paper, there's not a lot of associated costs, right? And finding the room for it and the filing equipment and all that stuff, right? Those costs really add up. You can greatly increase access to your record. So think about it. Somebody asks for a record. You have to get up, maybe go down into the basement where your records room is, get the key, go searching around, find the record. Could be half hour, 40 minutes later before you have it. If you have well-organized electronic records, it could take you maybe 30 or 40 seconds, right? So huge improvement there. Provide public access via the web. Wouldn't it be great? A lot of those records that the public comes in asking for, if you could just have them scanned and uploaded on your website. Say something even just like your board minutes. People could just go to the website and get a hold of it really easily. Enhanced disaster preparedness. Right? Now, the great thing about electronic records is they're relatively easy to back up, and they can be dispersed to a number of places, right? A lot of say cloud computing places where you store now, they have redundant systems built in. So there are multiple copies that are stored. Now, doing this, of course, with paper is very difficult. There are some industries, like in banking, they used to use a theory called disbursement, and they would make multiple copies of paper records and ship them off to different sites so they didn't lose the information. But as you can imagine, that's very expensive, very difficult to do. You can automate your retention and disposition. Wouldn't that be great, right? You just tell the system, this is a 6-year record. 6 years later, that record is deleted, and then you have an audit trail within the system, right, that keeps that record for you. Improving your public image, right? It probably doesn't look good to the public when they come in and they ask for a record, and you say, oh, that's stored off-site. We'll have it pulled. Can you come back sometime tomorrow? Well, no, I can't because I'm busy tomorrow. That's why I came today. It doesn't help. And really having a more paperless office, even if you don't reach it 100%, can really help your public image, right? You look cutting edge, like you're providing great service to the public, and that's a good thing. And then finally, of course, is another biggie, is just saving money. Okay, once you have these systems up and running, it should save you money in the long run. So now, I'm going to introduce you to our friend. This is Maria Sin-Papel. She is the town clerk, RMO, for the town of La Carterville. And so what Maria is going to help us do is walk through step by step and see how you can reach the paperless office, and also look at some of the pitfalls. So here's Maria's situation. She has been charged by the new town supervisor with making the town of Licardaville paperless ASAP. Okay, so this guy ran on a platform of making the town more cost efficient, getting things done better. So he tells Maria, okay, we want to reach the paperless office. So Maria comes to the quick conclusion that a lot of people do. She says, I know, I'll just scan everything. Well, that's really never a good idea. And here's what Maria finds out. So the town has 7,000 cubic feet of records. So if you're looking at an average about 2,500 pages per cubic foot, that's a total of 17,500,000 images. So at 7 cents an image to prep, scan, and index, it'll cost, well, you can see here, over $1 million. So when Maria tells the supervisor this, obviously he hits the ceiling a bit, and it's like, well, we can obviously not spend $1.2 million to make ourselves paperless, right? That's an awful lot of money, and things that the local residents and taxpayers would probably not be very happy about. So then Maria kind of has to go back to the drawing board here, right? So she's going to investigate. She's going to go back and she does something really smart. She's going to look at what are the root causes of too much paper, okay? Do some research here. Well, she discovers by doing her research that retention schedules are not followed very closely, so that's part of the reason. Another big problem is there's no official copy of the record designated. Now, as many of you may know, okay, retention schedules apply to one official copy of the record. However, if you have a situation where everybody's making their own copies of records, especially in paper, right, then you're going to end up with maybe 5 or 6 copies of one record. They may all eventually make it into your record room, so you're just creating way too much paper there. No control of printers or copiers. She discovers there's lots of printers and copiers all over town hall. There are no controls on them, and people are just constantly printing and copying all the time. There's no effort to manage born digital documents. She discovers that a lot of these paper records basically have a digital copy that's on someone's computer somewhere, but since the town has never made an effort to manage them, they can't use them. There's no central filing area for digital documents, so a lot of these important digital documents may be sitting on someone's personal hard drive. Nobody else can get to them, and they really need to be filed in a central area. And this is a big one. We're going to talk about this in more detail later, is the need for authorizing signatures. So people say, hey, you know what? Sometimes I just got to print this out because it needs a signature, right? You need somebody to sit down with a pen and actually sign it. And finally, there still is among people, and I have to admit myself to a certain extent, a kind of cultural attachment to paper, right? If you're an older person, a gray hair like me, you might still prefer using paper records. So the next step is Maria decides, well, let's go out to our record center, right? They've got an off-site record center. And she discovers it's an aging structure. It's got some problems. Heating, ventilation, and air conditioning don't work well. There were several leaks in the roof. And she starts to discover that, it probably costs a lot of money to really upgrade this building. So she takes an inventory. She discovers that there are 5,000 cubic feet currently stored there. About 85% of them have a 6-year retention period, right? So fairly low retention period. 2% have a 10-year retention period. 8% have a 55-year retention period. That, as many of you probably guessed, is your payroll. And then 5% are permanent. Okay, so now that Maria knows that, she can begin to plan. So now she goes back and she starts to solidify management support, right? She knows this. So she goes to the supervisor and says, hey, I know this is a goal of yours, but you're going to have to help me get everybody on board, issue directives, create policies, and tell people they need to cooperate in this effort. okay? Because if she doesn't get that, her plans are going to go nowhere. Next, she's going to create some short-range and long-range plans, which we'll talk about as we go along. She's going to need to prepare staff for changes, right? People are used to doing things certain ways. She's going to have to look at maybe some change management techniques to get people on board and get that buy-in. And then a real big one here that oftentimes people overlook is staff training. As you're developing new policies, new ways of doing things, staff is going to need that constant training and support from you to make sure they're on board. And Maria also decides to do what's easy first, right? We're all familiar with the term, go for the low-hanging fruit first, right? Because it's easy to get to. And when you do this, right, you have some very early successes that people can see, and that really helps them get them on board for further changes. So now, Maria begins to implement her plan. So she's going to do what's cheap and easy first. So she has the supervisor issue a directive enforcing retention schedules. Okay, he's telling everybody, listen, if that retention schedule says you only need to save it for 6 years, that's what you're going to do. And at the end of 6 years, you need to dispose of that record. Okay, designate official copies to reduce duplication. So everybody's got to get together and decide, okay, obviously purchase orders, who's going to have the official copy of that? It's going to be, you know, the fiscal department, finance, treasurer, whatever that might be called in that particular local government. Eliminate all but one printer and one copier, okay? So that's really going to serve as, you know, a way to stop people from constantly hitting the printer button, right? If there's only one printer in town hall and they have to walk all the way to the other side of town hall, they're going to be discouraged from printing too much. And the same thing with copying. And also, you can, on many, of course, the, you know, modern machines require passcodes for use, right? And then you could really track who's doing the printing and the copying. If they're doing too much of it, you can go and talk to them about why and see if you can get them to stop doing that. And set very strict policies for printing and copying. Okay, tell people you can only print and copy in these certain situations. Okay, but a big way that folks can, you know, start reducing that paper is to manage their born digital documents. Okay, most documents, of course, today come to life electronically on a computer, and I'm always fond of saying, if a document is born digital, it should die digital, right? So you should make every effort just to keep it as a digital or electronic document. So designate electronic copies as the official copy of the record. And the State Archives has actually come up with a sample resolution on how you can do that. You can have your governing board pass it, say from now on that digital copy is the official copy of the record, and any paper copies that exist are merely convenience copies that can be disposed of at any time. So if you're going to do this, you're going to need a good filing system for the electronic records. So what the town is going to do is form a team, come together and agree on a good electronic filing system, set up a series of folders and subfolders where people can put their important documents. Records with a 10-year or less retention may be retained in their native format. Okay, so what does that mean? So that document that perhaps you created in Microsoft Word or in Google Docs, something like that, you can keep in that native format, but if it's over 10 years old, you have to print that now as a PDF-A, which is the A there stands for archive. So theoretically, a PDF-A is going to last a really, really long time, right? It's not going to become obsolete. So instead of, you know, printing to paper, you can print to or save as a PDF. And I'm sure a lot of you know how to do this. Just for those of you who don't, I just gave a quick screenshot here. You can see now, in the olden days, right, when PDFs first came around, you used to have to use the print function. In most software now, I've noticed that it's a save as function. You just save as PDF. But you can see here, this is the print function I'm showing you. So you just change your printer there from whatever the name of your actual paper printer is to Adobe PDF, and you click print, and it just turns it into a PDF, which can now be saved long term instead of printing it to paper and filing it away. So that's one really simple common sense thing you could do. So now Maria decides, well, you know, we're not going to go back and do a huge back scanning project, right? She's already discovered that's way too expensive and involved. And, you know, when Maria thought it through, she realized, well, it didn't really make much sense either. But what she's going to do is implement day forward scanning. So if you decide on such and such a date forward, okay, all paper records that are received or created at that point will be scanned and put onto the computer. So she might choose a date, say like January the 1st, 2022 or something like that. So see here, she's going to scan all the paper records that still require printing. So for example, if you need an ink signature to authorize it. Now, we're going to talk a little bit later about electronic signatures. So for Maria now, this is just, you know, a first kind of stopgap measure. Scan all documents received from outside sources, right? Because you're going to receive things like letters from a residence or a completed paper form. So you're going to just scan those. So for instance, you know, most county clerk's office now, when somebody comes in to record their deed, what they do is they take the deed, they scan it, they verify that they have a good copy, they index it, and then they just hand the paper deed back to the homeowner or the homeowner's lawyer, and now they don't have to deal with any paper. Okay. Now, once it's verified, then what you're going to do is literally shred the paper original. So right next to your scanner, you should have a shredder. So you're going to scan it, verify you got a good copy, boom, put it right through the shredder. But just a friendly reminder, please always follow New York State Archives imaging guidelines, right, to make sure you have a good, authentic copy of that record for long-term use, and also for things like admissibility in court and things like that. You want to make sure you're following good guidelines. Okay, so next, we're going to look at some new policies that the town's going to implement, again, to cut down on paper. So all those doing business with the town must submit electronic documents, okay? So say a response to an RFP, it can't come in paper. They're going to be told it's got to come in electronically. Vouchers for payments need to be electronic. And here's a big one for municipalities like counties, towns, villages that have a building permitting system. And I know a lot of municipalities have moved to this. When somebody's, say, going to build a subdivision or even a new house or some other building, you know, they would submit all these plans and paperwork on paper. And when you have a board, say a zoning board that's reviewing it, that has 5 people, that you would then get multiple copies of these, right? And it would take up just a lot of room. So now many is saying, hey, you just have to submit all this stuff electronically. So Maria then comes up with a plan to close the record center, right? So instead of spending a lot of money to try to upgrade it, she's been taking steps to reduce all that paper. So she wants to come up with a plan of how they can eventually close it. So this is the plan that Maria comes up with. So she's planning on closing the record center within 5 to 7 years, okay? Because she knows now that 87% of the records stored will expire in 5 years, right? So you're only going to have 13% of the records left. So what she's going to do is only accept the previous year's records in the record center, and only those with 5 years or fewer remaining on the retention period, right? So if she's trying to keep that, you know, the volume coming into the record center, she's going to have to do that. So if it doesn't have 5 years or fewer, she doesn't want it there. And those are records that probably at this point should just be scanned. So then, you know, scan the current year's records so they don't have to go into there. So what Maria would do is say, okay, all records from this current year, 2021, cannot come into the record center. You're going to need to just scan those. Then scan the last 50 years of payroll. Even though they have a 55-year retention period, if Maria wants to close down in those 5 years, the retention period on those, right, from the 50 to the 55 years would expire, and she could just dispose of them. And probably going back that far with payroll records, there's probably not going to be a need to reference them anyway, so why spend all that money scanning them? And then, of course, scan all permanent records. Okay, so a lot of those old archival records with really intrinsic value, those can then just be put into cold storage somewhere, either maybe through a commercial facility or a small facility that the town sets up. Okay, so now Maria is going to start planning long-term, right? She went through basically her short-term plan, but now she wants to look at more sophisticated ways of reducing the paper. She's reduced a lot of paper, but not all of it. So how she's going to do that? She's going to look at electronic signatures, electronic content management systems. We're going to talk about these in more detail, and also the importance of migration plans. So first thing we're going to take a look at are electronic signatures. So for those of you who are unaware, New York has a law that is just called ESRA. It's the Electronic Signature and Records Act. Okay, and here's what it says. An electronic signature is an electronic sound, symbol, or process attached to or logically associated with an electronic record and executed or adopted by a person, and remember this term here, with the intent to sign the record. Okay, that's going to come up in following slides. So if you want to take a look at it, you can see here I included this is the website address where you can find a full PDF version that you can download. I've looked through a lot of it. It actually is kind of you know, interesting to look through. Some sections get very technical, and you may not understand it. I know I didn't understand it all myself, but if you are interested in using electronic signatures, definitely go take a close look at that law. And then, of course, at some point, talk to your counsel. So there are different types of approaches or technologies that you can use that are legally, essentially admissible and recognized. One is the click-through or click-wrap, they call it. So we're all familiar with this, right? You go to a website and it asks you to agree to something. So nowadays, you know, it seems every website I go to, you get one of these little things that pops up talking about, you know, the fact that they use cookies, etc., blah, 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 and then you click OK. So by clicking OK, it's basically the equivalent of signing a piece of paper. Okay, you're agreeing to this. A personal identification number or password system, where in order to sign something, you have to have a password or a PIN that's authenticating, okay, yeah, this is who I am, and this is me who's actually signing this. Then you've got things like digitized signatures. So for instance, I'm going to go backwards here a second. You know, we've got this image here. We've all seen these little pads, right? I'm sure you've all used them. You sign them, you see them in the supermarkets, things like that. And basically all it's doing is creating a digital image of your actual ink signature. Okay, and oftentimes too, you may see that people will actually create a digitized signature for themselves. They sign a piece of paper, they scan it, and then they use that as a digital signature. Then there, of course, is biometrics. That would be things like, a retina scanner. It scans your eyes. There are things that can actually listen to your voice, fingerprints, things like that. So for those of you like me who may use something like Apple Pay, okay, when I use it, I use my fingerprint to authorize that payment. So that's a biometric signature. You may not have thought about it like that, but that's exactly what it is. Then there is something called public key, private key. This one is much more technologically advanced. And how this works is an individual has two mathematical keys, a private one that only that person knows, and then a public one that's known to all. So when he signs a private key with the other party can then validate it with a public key, and essentially they have to match up. Okay, so I've got your public key, now you've just embedded your private key in it, and the system can look at it and say, okay, this matches up. Yes, you are the one who is signing this document. Now, just so we can confuse you a little bit, okay, there is technically a difference, and I'm going to show you a demonstration here in a moment, between an electronic signature and a digital signature. Even though they both fall under essentially the rubric of the Electronic Signature and Records Act, there is technically a difference. Now, this chart here I got, right, this little table that compares them, I have to give credit for since I took it right from the website. There's a neat website called differencebetween.net. And basically, it's when you want to know the difference between two different things, you're not sure, you can go and you can search this site. And I did this to, find a really good description of what the difference is between a digital signature and electronic signature. Overall, a digital signature is more secure. It's more technologically advanced, if you will. So with a digital signature, it really helps secure the document. It can't be changed. With the electronic signature, it's used basically to verify a document, and it goes down again to showing the intent to sign. So you could see here on the right under electronic signature, that's the last one, shows the intent to sign the contract. Okay, so with the digital signature, it's more concerned about securing the document. You can see here also a digital signature can be verified. An electronic signature usually cannot be verified. Common types of digital signatures are based on Adobe and Microsoft. And that's what I'm going to show you in a moment, the difference between the two. Okay, so, and the main types of electronic signature include verbal, electronic, ticks, or scanned signatures. Okay. So I hope this makes sense to people. I know this could be a little confusing, the difference between electronic and digital. And I don't know if this is super important, but if you do start looking into using these signatures, electronic signatures, maybe looking at software and things like that, this is probably going to come up. So you should have a little bit of understanding at least that this issue does exist. So I found a couple of examples, okay, from right here at the archives. Now the archives, like a lot of institutions today, does have a telecommuting program now. So I can work from home one day a week, which I've decided to do. But what we need to do is submit to our supervisors a telecommuting work plan. So I have to state exactly what I'm going to be doing on that day and what I hope to accomplish on that day that I'll be working from home. So the department came up with a very simple, easy way to do this. They created this electronic form. I fill it out, and then I sign it, and I send it off to my supervisor. So you can see here how I sign it is just literally I type my name in, right? Nothing fancy. I'm just literally typing my name into it and then dating it and sending it off. Now, since this is going through my email account, my supervisor, of course, can feel pretty confident that yes, this is Dave's signature, and he sent it off. So this again is my intent, right? By typing my name into there, just simply using the keyboard, I'm showing my intent to sign it. So, and I could actually use any symbol I want, right? We go back to that definition of Ezra, right? It's any sound or symbol. My symbol could be an emoji smiley face that I put in there, and that is an electronic signature, believe it or not. So think of it back in the old days, right? Many of you may know that if somebody was illiterate or they were somehow affirmed and they could not sign their name, they would often just use an X, right? That it was called their mark. They just made an X. So it's the same thing with the electronic signature. Any mark that you make there, as long as it's your intent to sign it, is legally binding. Now, here's the thing. For a simple process like this, is this fine for a signature? Sure. But how many of you would want to sign, say, a 5-year, $1.2 million contract doing something like this? Probably not a good idea, and I'm sure most of you wouldn't do it. You'd want something more secure. Well, I'm going to show you an example. So this is an example of a digital signature using Adobe Professional. And actually understand now that even the Adobe Reader will allow you to sign documents. So in this case, you can see here, okay, this form here, this is an authorization to travel. So the department has set up something, a little bit more sophisticated because this involves authorizing the spending of money. So you want to do something a little bit more secure. So in this case, what I do when I sign this document is I click on the signature field there, and you can see here, I hope you can see this okay, it's a little blurry. I put a password in there and then I click sign. And in the end, it looks something like this. So you can see here, this was one I was actually approving for an employee. Many of you know Sarah Derling. So Sarah, you can see here about a month or so ago, she sent me a request to travel, and she digitally signed it, right? So now you can see here what Adobe is doing, okay, is they're inserting essentially this digital stamp, right? You can see the watermark here, the little Adobe symbol, and it's telling everybody exactly the date and the exact time that Sarah signed this. Then she forwarded it to me, and it was digitally signed by me. It looks like about an hour later after that. And now to show you this too, if you leave your mouse above this, it's right, it's telling everybody this is a valid signature, right? So what's going on here is now nobody can change the signatures here, right? They've been electronically embedded into the document, unlike that other document I signed just by typing my name, which somebody could easily delete, right? It's not really secure. Here, you can see this is much more secure. So essentially what we have here is Sarah and I have a third party validating, yes, that we did actually sign this. This is our electronic signature, and that was our intent to do. So in recent years, there's been a bit of an explosion in e-signature software. So this is just actual software that you can purchase that usually integrates very well with existing software that you're using, say Microsoft Word, something like that. Although actually Word, like Adobe, actually has electronic signatures functions built into it and does very similar things that Adobe does. So you can see here, I just picked out 5 as an example. There are lots of them out there. So in no way is this an endorsement. This is just some examples I found for you. DocuSign is one of the most popular. Many of you actually may have heard of DocuSign. And they have different types of plans. So one, you can have a limited plan, which limits the number of documents you can sign per month. That one's $15 per user per month. And you can go up to an unlimited plan, where you can sign as many documents as you need to. That one's $40 per user per month. And some companies, they may charge by the number of signed documents, so basically almost on like a per document basis, they charge you. And some of those you have just a low number you can actually do for free. One of them here, Doc Sketch, that one allows you up to 3 free signatures on a document per month. So if you're a small village, you don't do a lot of this, you can find some pretty low cost ways of doing this. So nowadays electronic signatures are becoming much easier. It's much easier to implement, and then again you're cutting out that need for printing paper to sign something with an ink signature. So the next kind of advanced solution here we're going to talk about is an ECMS, or an electronic content management system. Sometimes you may hear them referred to as an electronic document management system, or just a content management system. There are loads of different terminologies for these. However, it all comes down to the same thing, basically software to manage your documents. So AIM, which is the Association for Information and Image Management, defines an ECMS as a central technology platform used to capture, manage, store, preserve, and deliver electronic content. So it has a central repository for storing your electronic documents, so basically a big database that they all go into. It can manage records in many formats, so spreadsheets, word process documents, PDFs, even things like audio, visual, video, things like that. It can manage it all. And in the end, what it does is it provides structure for unstructured data. So what do we need by these terms, structured and unstructured data? Structured data is data that's essentially in a database, right? It's in a nice table with column headings and things like that. So it's very well organized. It has structure. Unstructured data, those are all those individual documents that you may have floating around on your hard drive or on a network somewhere that oftentimes are just not very well organized. There's no structure. So what this does is it brings structured to all those unstructured documents. So let's take a look at some of the main functional components of this. Now the biggie here you can see at the top, scanning and digitizing, right? That's by far the most popular. And oftentimes, unfortunately, when people get these systems, so say something like DocuWare I know is popular, Laserfiche, I'm sure, let's see, we have about 135 attendees here, it looks like. I'm sure some of you are using Laserfiche. It's a very popular program with local governments, and that's the main thing people often use it for, but it does have a lot of other capabilities, and so do other ECMs. Like the big one here is managing born digital documents. So what you should do is try avoiding ever having that digital document go to paper. Sometimes people have this odd habit of they create the document electronically, it's on their computer, it gets printed somewhere down the road. They say, hey, wouldn't this be great if we had this record on the computer? And then they scan it back in. So they're, managing that born digital document kind of cuts out that expensive process. Also, a lot of them have email management components to them. Records management components. You may hear the term RMA. Okay, so that's Records Management Application. That's basically a module that helps you apply retention and disposition to your electronic documents. So you can say, okay, this is a 6-year record, a 10-year record, a permanent record, and it assigns that retention policy. And many of them have, as I mentioned before, have automatic deletion at the end of 6 years, so just automatically delete that record, and you don't even have to worry about it. Electronic forms and workflow, very popular, and again, something great to use. And some of them have more advanced integration functionality. So for instance, GIS, which is Geographic Information Systems, or CAD, which is Computer-Aided Design, that's used oftentimes by engineers and architects. It can even manage files like that. And like I said, often it will just integrate with your existing software. So many of you are likely using Microsoft 365, which includes SharePoint. And again, this is not an endorsement of these products, but it's just the reality that so many of us use these products, right? So SharePoint, I don't know if, how many people are using SharePoint. I'm sure most of you probably heard of it. So what SharePoint is, it's kind of like an intranet website for your organization. And its main function really is collaboration, all right, allowing people to come together, share documents, work on documents simultaneously, things like that. However, for a long time, many organizations have been using SharePoint, essentially as an EDMS. Okay, because it has a lot of good functionality like an EDMS does, and I'm gonna show you an example of that in a moment. But there are records managers who don't like this idea because they say SharePoint really wasn't designed as an EDMS. But that's something, I don't think you really need to worry about. So if you have SharePoint and perhaps you don't have the resources to go out and get a fancy off-the-shelf EDMS, you could look into using SharePoint to do that for you. So SharePoint allows you to do things, of course, like create filing systems and apply retention rules to folders and documents, things like that. So you can set up a folder, okay, everything in here has a 6-year retention period. Or you can just apply that retention period to the document itself. Again, it's got auto deletion functions, and also if you're using Microsoft email, okay, using Outlook, something like that, that also has retention rules built right into it that you can use. So let me show you an example here of what you can do with SharePoint and Microsoft 365. Now, Microsoft 365, just in case you're unaware, up until recently was called Microsoft Office 365. They just dropped the Office. So that's what, or you might hear people use the term M365. That's just what they're referring to. So now you have to be an administrator, okay, in order to do these things. But you can see here how you can set up retention periods, retain items for a specific period. So in this case, it's setting a 7-year retention period from the date the item was created, okay? And then you can see here you have other functions. You can mark something as a record. So what does that mean? Well, usually once that document is 100% complete, you're not going to make any more changes to it. You mark it as a record, kind of locks the record, and then applies a retention period to it. You can also mark it as something as called a regulatory record. So that means the record relates to some sort of a regulation, and that regulatory law might actually have a retention period already built into it. And you can see here on this, it says, delete items automatically. You can check on that. So that just gives you an idea of what SharePoint can do and how it can really act as an EDMS for you. So if you have this tool, you might want to look into using it. Now, one important thing for me to say here is a lot of this will matter on what subscription level you do have to Microsoft 365. If you have it, that may mean something like you need to upgrade your subscription and pay more money, which I know for many of you can turn out to be an issue. But this is something, you may want to look into at some point. Same thing with email retention rules. Okay, this is from Microsoft Outlook. You can see here how you can set up retention and archive policies right here. So you can archive an email after a certain amount of time, or apply, excuse me, a retention period where it will eventually just be deleted. And you can see here, if you look at the bottom of this menu, if none of these choices work for you, you can more retention policies. You can set up your own, and again, you can set a policy actually for a folder that you have within your email system that you dump there that will automatically either archive or delete the email. So keep in mind here, and the point I'm trying to make with a lot of this is sometimes people have tools at their disposal that they don't realize, like say the electronic signatures. Like I said, that's built into Adobe and a lot of Microsoft products now. It's actually there. You can start using it. You just may not have known it. The same thing with setting up retention rules and other things you can do. Look at the full capability of the software systems that you're using, because you may be unaware of some of what it can actually do for you. So, but here's the conclusion that, Marie is coming to here. She realizes that an ECM can be expensive, and she said we don't have the IT infrastructure to support it. So what they could do is build that ECM slowly, which means they'd have to slowly start upgrading their IT infrastructure in order to implement it. And when you start out with an ECM, so say if you did go out and buy DocuWare or Laserfiche, it's always good to start off maybe with just one or two departments, see how it goes, work your way through it, look at some of the challenges and hurdles you have to get by. And then once you've done that, you can then start expanding into other departments. Trust me, this will go a lot more smoothly for you if you do. But if Maria doesn't want to do that, she could look at a lot of them are now cloud-based systems, often called SaaS or software as a service, that you can just go up and sign up, pay a monthly fee, and then you just have access to the system that's online, and you just upload your documents into the system. And what's great about that is then those documents, you have copies of them off-site, right? They're up in the cloud somewhere. God forbid there's a disaster in town hall, a flood, a fire, something like that. Those documents are safe. Now, for New York State local governments, there is a actual local government called the Digital Towpath. Okay, it's called the Digital Towpath Cooperative, and they have actually developed a nice little ECM that local governments, again, for a monthly fee, can sign up for it. And I think this might be a good solution, really, too, for those smaller local governments, right? So if you're a small village or maybe a small school district, something like that, without a lot of resources, Digital Towpath may work for you. Or you could look at taking a shared services approach, right? So this is what Marie is going to do. She investigates and she finds out that her county has an ECM, and for a fee, they will allow the town to use it. Okay, so you can see here, Marie says, I'm going to start with a building department and expand from there. And actually, in municipalities, building departments one of the popular ones to start with, because they oftentimes have a lot of paper. They've got those building permit files, which have essentially an indefinite retention period on them. So that's always a good place to look to start if you're going to do that. So Marie signs an intermunicipal agreement with her county, and she's going to use her county's ECM. But Maria wants to keep one thing in mind, okay? I don't want to see all my hard work disappear because of poor planning, okay? The town should have a migration plan in place, and basically all a migration plan is a commitment to frequent software and hardware updates and keeping up with the technology, right? So if one system, say a software you're using, that company stops supporting it, maybe gets bought by another company, goes out of business, something like that, you want to make sure you can get all your documents out of that system and into a new system. Okay, you're going to need good planning to do that. So you want to commit funds for those upgrades. Okay, constantly keep your software, whether it's the operating system, the application, whatever, or the hardware too. Always make sure it is regularly upgraded. If not, you could lose records due to obsolescence. So we use only two non-proprietary format for long-term records, and the state archives we recommend TIFF or PDF, or better yet, PDF-A if you're going to use PDF. PDF, it's, the regular PDF is pretty reliable, but for your really long-term stuff, like say permanent, you probably want to go with a PDF-A. Okay, so what did Maria learn this process, right? So if you want to head towards a paperless office, one is you got to get and then maintain that support. Unless you're getting that support from the top, it's going to be very difficult for you to move forward. Get buy-in and manage the change. Again, that's equally as important as getting support from the top. Okay, if folks aren't going to cooperate with you in this, again, it's going to be very difficult to reach your goal. And plan carefully, right? So you could see Maria kind of got off on the wrong foot by saying, let's just scan everything. But then she got smart and started saying, okay, let's go back. Let's start off with researching what are our major problems, then plan out how, step by step by step, how we're going to solve each one of those problems. Of course, now be realistic too. Take into account your resources, right? Maria wasn't doing that at first. She's like, well, let's just scan everything, and then discovers it's $1.2 million. And she also knows that, right, she didn't have the infrastructure on site for good ECM, so she looked for other solutions, and she found the solution of working with county. Carefully document policies and procedures, okay, and keep them updated too. You should be reviewing them at least once a year and making sure they're still pertinent and they're up to date. And always keep records management front and center, right? If you're looking to move towards a paperless office, don't just concentrate on technology and technological solutions. You always have to keep those records management principles up in front and center in your mind as you move along, because what you don't want to do is end up with an all-electronic record system that's messy and hard to use, okay? So Maria's final words of advice: you can't do it overnight, but think big and start small. So having said all that, I see him got pretty close to 11 o'clock there. Do we have questions, Rich?
You sure do, Dave. We have a slew of them. Okay. So let's see. We have a question here pretty early on from James. Can official documents be digital only?
Yes, they can. Okay, it's perfectly fine to do that. It's perfectly legal to do that. You can scan a record, and as long as you're following State Archives guidelines, you verify that you have a good scan, you can then dispose of the paper record. The one caveat we always tell people is, well, if it's an old archival record, right, with historical value, intrinsic value to it, so obviously you don't want to say, hey, let's scan our minute book from 1832, and then now that it's scanned, let's chuck up the garbage. You don't want to do that, obviously, but anything else, yeah, that's fine.
Okay. All right. We have a question here from Aaron. If you don't have a website, should you would like to transition to electronic records?
Have a website?
If you don't have one, say a local government does not have a website, should they get one if they would like to transition to electronic records?
I don't think they necessarily have to, but certainly not a bad idea. So say, especially if they wanted to make the records accessible to the public, having a website would be a good idea.
And another question here from Aaron: will electronic digital signatures hold up on official legal records?
Yes, I mean, if you look at the guideline of Ezra, and as long as you're following those guidelines in Ezra, you should be fine. Like I said, I think it's a good idea as you move towards electronic signatures to have your counsel involved in the process as well.
And Jasmine asks, what are the New York State requirements for record retention, for the retention of documents related to minutes, resolutions, etc., for paper and digital on the website?
Okay, they're the same. So regardless of format of the record, of course, minutes are permanent. Minutes and resolutions are permanent. Whether they're now, you'd have to decide which one is your official copy of the record. Now, minutes are one of those series that I kind of encourage people to still keep a paper copy of. It's great to have them electronic too for easy accessibility. That's always one series I say you might want to also still keep those in paper as well, even if you just keep them stored in a vault somewhere, and you don't need to refer to them because you have the electronic copy.
Okay, I have a question here from Maria. If you set up a department or a date for everyone to start everything electronic, would anything before that date be considered a back scan? And she also asked about the resolution that you had mentioned.
Yes, so yeah, anything would be sort of a back scan, or sometimes called a back file conversion. So if you say, well, we've got all this stuff from previous years, we're going to start scanning it. Yeah, that's a back file conversion of those records. And as far as the resolution, yeah, we hope to get that up on we're kind of redesigning a website right now. We're hoping to get that up soon. But you can contact your regional officer for a copy of that.
Also, David, just looking, we do have the model resolution up. I can send the link.
Oh, we do? Oh.
Yeah, so I'll send the link to folks.
Okay, I didn't think that had gone up yet. Well, good to know.
All righty. And let's see. The next question is from Dawn. Is SharePoint hacker-free?
Well, I don't know if anything's hacker-free. I'm not a tech guy. It is essentially an intranet site. I've never heard of SharePoint sites being hacked, but that doesn't mean that it hasn't happened.
Okay. Let's see. From Aaron. What are the retention rules for emails on Outlook?
Well, the retention rules, well, if you're a New York State local government, okay, when you're looking at your email, you have to look at unfortunately, the content of each email to decide, A, is it a record, and B, if so, what category does it fall in? A lot of them would basically fall into the category of general correspondence. So then you just have to decide, well, okay, so we're going to save these, those records for 6 years, and then you essentially apply that retention rule of 6 years to the email.
Okay, let's see here. Got a question here from Melissa. Do you have any information on hiring a person or company to take our old payroll records, last 50 years, and have them digitized? And would there be any grants from New York State that could cover some of that cost?
Well, I'll answer the second part first. Yes, you can get a grant from the New York State Archive to digitize your payroll records. Those are one of the most popular record series to digitize, if not maybe the most popular to do. Yeah, but we do have grants. And okay, what was the first part of the question again? I just blanked out.
Yes, that was information on hiring a person or a company.
Oh, yeah, there are loads of vendors that do that. And if you're doing a big back file conversion like that, really, I would say the best thing to do is to hire, a vendor who has lots of experience and is set up to do it. Now, we don't make recommendations, of course. Legally, you should be going through the New York State Industries for the Disabled because they are a preferred vendor for digitizing records. And, they could help you find a good vendor to do that for you. And if you're going to do it with grant funding, that would be one of the requirements, is to go through the Industries for the Disabled.
And Dave, I was going to mention, I just pasted in if folks want to talk to, if they're with a state agency, I put in the contact information for our State Archives, State Agency Records Management Advisory staff, and if they're local government, how to contact their RAO, Regional Advisory Officer.
Thanks.
I will also put in some information on where to go for grant information for our local governments. Okay, but let me just have you field this question here from Maria. Who should be in control of electronic records documents, and when should you consider electronic an electronic image as a record for the time it is filled out? I guess that's probably the first part. Who should be in control of the electronic records documents?
Well, that's an interesting question of who should be in control. In some sense, it may turn out to be your system administrator in a certain sense, but your record should also have a designated owner, essentially. So from what department it comes from, whether it's a paper record or a scanned record or an electronic record, it essentially belongs to the department that created it.
Okay, and the second part of that is, let's see here, when should you consider an electronic record, an electronic image as a record?
Well, essentially that's local policy. So if you just want to use essentially the scan of the record, the digitized version for access, and you want to save the paper for long-term preservation, you can do that, or you can simply designate the electronic version as the official record and then just dispose of the paper. So essentially it just comes down to a local decision of how you'd like to handle that.
Okay, have a question here from Aaron, or Nancy rather. Regarding automatic deletion, do those RMS systems include some kind of proof? And she says here, many times for discovery or FOIL requests, we have had to furnish a certified copy of our disposition sheets when a requested record has already been disposed of because it was a past retention.
Yes, because they do leave essentially an audit trail of when that was disposed of and in accordance with the retention schedules. However, you can, if you're uncomfortable doing that, you can also set up these systems to alert somebody, and it goes through a final, essentially human review process before it is disposed of.
Okay. And
my understanding too is I think some of these systems will actually create a little certificate of destruction for you and say, these records were disposed of on such and such a date.
And it looks like the final question here is from Miranda. Can you have confidential information such as Social Security numbers in 365, or is it not secure enough?
Yeah, that's a real technical question. I wouldn't be sure of. But you have to look at things like compliance rules. If you do have records with Social Security numbers, then of course you should be limiting the access of, who can see them. And again, these systems can do that based upon your password, who can see particular records and who can't.
And Dave, I was just going to say to folks out there, if any of you are sitting in a group of people, if you could just let us know how many are participating in this webinar. So if there's 2, 3, 4 of you, if there's just one person, don't worry about that. But we just want to get a sense of if there's a larger group here for our counting our numbers here. If you could just type that in the chat box, that would be great. And I don't see any other questions, Dave.
Okay.
And I did want to remind folks that, of course, this session is being recorded, and it will be available either through our website, at a recording site, or on our YouTube page within about a week or so.
Rich, I just I want to point out before other people leave. The model resolution that you said, that's to adopt the schedule, not to make electronic records the official copy.
Gotcha.
So again, that person, hopefully they're still on. Contact your RAO for a copy of that.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Dave.
Okay. And if that's it, thanks everybody for attending. I hope you got something out of it. And if you're going to pursue that paperless office, I wish you lots of luck. And again, we're here to help you too. So keep that in mind.
Thanks, everybody.